Live from the McGlowan Theater here at Spirit Square in Uptown Charlotte, this is the 9th District Congressional Debate exclusively on Spectrum News. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Tim Boyd, your moderator this evening and host of Capitol Tonight. The 9th District includes the Charlotte suburbs along the southern North Carolina border over to the Fayetteville area and parts of Cumberland County. Our candidates tonight, Democrat Dan McCready and Republican Mark Harris. We are in front of a live audience tonight. Thank you folks for being with us tonight, and thank you so much to everyone at home as well. This is one of the most hotly contested races in the entire country and is being watched by folks all over the country. Our format for this evening, each candidate will get 1 minute for opening statements. They will also get 1 minute for closing statements. In between there will be a series of questions. Each candidate will get 1 minute to answer the question. The opponent will get 1 minute to respond, and the person that got the question will get a 30-second rebuttal. We'll go back and forth to make sure that we're fair for who gets the question first and who gets the rebuttal. We did do a coin flip to see who would go first tonight for opening and closing statements. That person was Dan McCready. So with that, let's get to it. Mr. McCready, your minute starts now.
Thank you. I never planned to run for Congress. I was perfectly happy a year and a half ago, spending time with my wife, Laura, spending time with my 4 little kids, and continuing to build my small business. This is a calling I feel to fight back for people in North Carolina that deserve better. The first time I felt that calling was in the years after 9/11, before I joined the Marine Corps, and I feel it again now. Too many people in North Carolina are having to worry about crushing healthcare costs, are looking for jobs and opportunity. Too many of our seniors are worried about their Social Security and Medicare being there for them. This is a calling I feel to fight back for people in North Carolina that deserve better. I look forward to talking with you tonight about some of the differences between my opponent and myself and having the opportunity to earn your vote on November 6th.
Mr. McCready, thank you very much. Mr. Harris, your minute.
Well, let me first of all thank you, Tim, and all of you who have given up an evening to come and be a part of this and to watch by television. Tonight, you're going to hear 2 very different visions of America and for the 9th Congressional District. My Democrat opponent, Dan McCready, is a very nice guy, has a beautiful family, and I have no doubt that he cares about this country. But we have fundamental disagreements about what we need in Congress and who should be in charge. You see, this race at its core is about one thing, and that's who calls the shots in Congress. A vote for my Democrat opponent is a vote for Nancy Pelosi and the far left. But me, I'm a genuine conservative. I've spent my life building up people in our communities. You know where I stand on the issues and who I support. I'll never hesitate to take a stand and answer tough questions because that's what you deserve from someone who wants to be your congressman. I hope tonight I can earn your vote.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. I'm going to get some questions for you individually in a moment, but I do want to start with a national question. I actually want to start with one that was asked first last week on the national debt. You were asked about cuts that you would support or taxes that you would raise to deal with the national debt, but neither of you was terribly specific. So, Mr. McCready, you said one way not to handle it was the recent tax bill, the cuts bill. But that's already in place, and you've been supportive of middle-class tax cuts. So are you saying that you would like to repeal parts of that tax bill, or do you support any entitlement reforms? And please be specific. Your minute starts.
There's 3 things I think we need to do to take on our national debt, which is a huge problem. Our national debt right now is around $20 trillion, which is crushing for our middle class and crushing for our children and future generations. The first thing I believe is we need to grow our economy. We need to simplify regulations, especially for small business. We need to continue to simplify the tax code to bring in more revenue. But the second thing is cutting out loopholes for the ultra-wealthy. It's not right, for example, that someone like Warren Buffett or the Koch brothers is paying less than 1/1000% of their income to the Social Security payroll tax, while a teacher is paying more than 3%. And then the third thing is to run government like a business. I've built a business from scratch. I've made payroll. I've balanced a budget. I think we need to bring a business-minded approach to Washington. But we also have to not support a $2 trillion tax bill that my opponent supports, or a tax bill rather that blows a $2 trillion hole in our national debt.
Mr. Harris, your response, and also what specific entitlement reforms do you support?
Sure. I believe, as I said last week in the debate, that our national debt is one of the greatest challenges we face as a nation. I think it is an issue of national security, and it's actually $21 trillion that we are dealing with in our national debt. And there are 2 key things that have to go on at the same time. One of them is to grow the economy, as I pointed out last week, and that's exactly what this president is doing. He is growing the economy. We've seen it with the tax cuts, which was an incredible stimulus. We've seen it with the rollback of regulations, again, stimulating this economy to growth. But there's also a second part to it, and that is that we've got to be willing to make the hard decisions and to cut spending. A good example, and he talks about, my opponent talks about the blowing the hole in the debt, but the reality of that bill, if you'll recall, that was passed last spring, was the fact that that $1.3 trillion spending bill actually is what propelled me to win the nomination through the Republican primary, because that omnibus bill was $800 billion for our military, but $500 billion of far more spending. I oppose that, and our president even stated his opposition.
I have to wrap you up. 30 seconds to you, Mr. McCready. And again, you don't support that tax bill, so would you want it repealed?
Well, I would. The reason, what I didn't like about that tax bill was that it did not do enough tax cuts to the middle class. I applaud the tax cut to the middle class during that tax bill. That tax bill should have made the middle class tax cuts permanent and do even more for the teachers and the firefighters and the people struggling every day. But my issue, my issue with that bill is it blows a $2 trillion hole in our national debt. At the end of the day, 83% of the benefits of that tax bill go to the wealthy and the ultra wealthy. So Mark Harris stands here and he says he supports a tax bill that blows $2 trillion to our debt, and then he comes around and says he wants to cut Social Security and Medicare for our seniors.
I need to stop you as well. All right, the next question.
Can I say something there?
Well, this is the format that you debated on. I'm free to open it up if you guys want to, but this is the format that you all agreed to. So you can answer in part of the next one. I have no problem kind of a freewheeling debate, but that's not what your campaigns agreed to. Mr. Harris, you've been an adamant supporter of President Trump and his family, and they have helped you through this campaign, including this week as well. Clearly, he has a strong legion of supporters. However, there are also some conservatives that have changed their mind and no longer support him, and many are basing their support of a candidate based on that. Why should those voters, what is expected to be a very close race, support you if they are concerned that you'll simply be a rubber stamp for his policies, tactics, and demeanor?
Well, I don't look at it, and quite frankly, as being a rubber stamp at all. I look at it as supporting policies which we've supported from the beginning that this president has introduced and has been moving forward. And I continue to offer that kind of support. You can't argue with the success. This president promised us that he was going to deal with the trade issue, and he brought the Europeans to the table. We saw Mexico and Canada come to the table, and now he is leveling the playing field in China. He told us that he was going to do tax reform, and he's gotten it done. He told us he was going to appoint conservatives to the U.S. Supreme Court who were originalists that understood their job was to interpret the law, not to make the law. This president has continued to do simply what he said he was going to do, and he's getting it done, and that's what's at stake in this election. We'll either finish the job where he has started in the policies and the direction, or we're going to turn time back and put Nancy Pelosi in charge of the U.S. House, and then we're going to see what comes.
All right.
Thank you.
Please. We need to get as many questions as possible, so please hold too much loud applause. Mr. McCready, your response, you a minute.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Mark, you're not running against Nancy Pelosi, you're running against a United States Marine. There's a reason that Mark Harris talks a lot about Nancy Pelosi. If you're a career politician who's been running for office for 6 years straight, you are very interested in Nancy Pelosi and D.C. insider politics and talking points. Let me tell you who I'm focused on fighting for. I'm focused on Heather, who I met a couple weeks ago, who's making $13.88 an hour. She's worked 11 years at Piedmont Airlines. She's a single mom with 3 kids, and her supervisor just told her that she needs to take out food stamps and go on Medicaid. I'm fighting for our seniors who are terrified that folks like Mark will get in office and cut their Social Security and Medicare. I'm fighting for people all across North Carolina, including rural North Carolina, who deserve a fighter for jobs and opportunity.
President, you get 30 seconds.
Tim, let me be clear, and I think it may be important for Dan to get his facts straight because I have only run for office since 2014, but I'm not surprised that he got the facts wrong on that, which is only 4 years, not 6. But I'm also fascinated because the reality is that he continues to misstate the facts. He talks about the tax cut as if nothing was done for the middle class. We have seen everybody benefit from the tax cut bill. It raised the child deduction, you might recall. It raised the standard deduction, you might recall. So everybody generated. And let's not forget the crumbs that Nancy Pelosi mentioned, where so many people received their bonus because of how it grew.
All right. So this next question is for Mr. McCready, and we're going to get to this because this has come up already a lot. You have said that you will not vote for Nancy Pelosi, and you want new leaders. However, you may not have that choice. There's a strong possibility your only choice will be Nancy Pelosi or the Republican. If that ends up being the situation, what is your plan? Would you abstain? And if your answer is that you won't deal with hypotheticals, don't voters deserve to know what you would do in that situation, considering you've made a big deal out of her not being who you vote for?
It's hard for pundits in Washington, D.C. people to understand. I just am not interested in D.C. insider politics. I've said since day one I will not vote for Pelosi. I've not taken a dime of her money. I won't vote for Paul Ryan either. That's why I called for an investigation into congressional leadership's handling of the sexual assault taxpayer-funded hush funds last year. Who I look forward to working with, should I have the honor of serving, to get to your question, are the post-9/11 veterans who are running all across this country. Folks like me who didn't plan to run for office but feel really convicted about the direction our country's headed. I plan to form a caucus of 9/11 veterans, Republicans and Democrats, who can come together and actually serve as one voice and serve as a check on this broken back and forth between Nancy Pelosi and Paul Ryan that is killing our country.
Mr. Harris?
Well, Tim, once again, the question was asked, would he vote for the Republican nominee or Nancy Pelosi, who articles over the last week from Steny Hoyer and others have made it clear that she has the votes lined up, or would he abstain? He's not answering your question because he knows if he does, you will not vote for him. The reality is that there is a sense of being naive about going to Washington. For someone that is not interested about getting in there and knowing that the Democrats will nominate their speaker candidate, Republicans will nominate theirs, and you have a choice of whether you're going to support the Republican or Nancy Pelosi or abstain. And the citizens of the 9th District deserve to know what the congressman will do. And I have no problem stating to you tonight, I will support the Republican nominee, the three names that have been mentioned, from Jim Jordan to Kevin McCarthy to Steve Scalise. All three of them will be superior to Nancy Pelosi.
All right, folks. You got it. Mr. McCready, you have 30 seconds.
I don't know how to be more clear on this. I will not be voting for Nancy Pelosi. I will not be voting for Paul Ryan. Who I will be voting for is a new leader. Because I believe, and the entire reason I'm running, is that the politicians up there in Washington, they show up with good intentions, but it becomes all about their own reelections. Whatever their party leaders say, it becomes all about the special interests and the money, and they forget who they're fighting for. So I will look and see who else emerges as a potential leader of the Congress and be voting for a new leader. But we'll also be working with the post-9/11 veterans all across this country who believe we cannot have any more of this extreme, broken partisan politics that my opponent perpetuates.
Right, we need to wrap you, Mr.
We need
McCready.
folks who will put country over party and get things moving for North Carolina families.
All right. This next question is for Mr. Harris. With multiple devastating hurricanes in recent years and just two in the past 2 months, there have been inundated with questions, frankly, about you specifically about climate change. A recent United Nations report presented some dire warnings regarding climate change. U.S. Senator Tom Tillis recently told me that he now believes humans are having an impact. In fact, we did a debate with both of you in 2014, and neither one of you said that climate change was a fact. Mr. Harris, do you believe climate change is real? Do you believe humans are having an impact on it? And should government have a role in trying to minimize it?
I believe that there's no question that the earth is getting warmer, and I acknowledge that and have acknowledged that all along. But I do not believe that the bodies of evidence on both sides have clearly determined whether or not humans are creating that problem. I want to be very clear that President Trump pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accord for several reasons. One, because it was $3 trillion over the next several decades that, plus the UN Climate Slush Fund, were going to be underwritten by American taxpayers. It was also because of lost jobs. That our economy was going to lose $6.5 million from the industrial sector jobs and other things that are so important to us. The U.S. is already a clean energy and oil and gas leader in this country, in this world. And we've got to be clear on that. So while I do agree that the earth is warming, I do not necessarily buy in to the fact that as humans that we are creating the issue.
Mr. McCready.
Climate change is real, and it's not just real, but it's a moral imperative to deal with it. I think my opponent and I have found one thing that we actually agree on, which is that we are a clean energy leader here in the United States. We're not just in the United States, but we're a clean energy leader here in North Carolina. And as a matter of fact, I started a company with another Marine that helped make North Carolina #2 in the country in solar power. Our investments helped build 36 large-scale solar farms, more than 1,500 acres that put more than 700 people to work in good-paying middle-class jobs. Folks like a guy, Michael, I got to know a couple years ago on one of our solar farms, who grew up in a rough neighborhood in New Orleans, came to North Carolina. He started off as a junior construction hand in our solar industry. And when I met him, he was managing 80 people at a state-of-the-art 40-acre power plant. That's what we can do with leadership that looks forward, not leadership that looks backwards like Mark Harris will take us.
Mr.
Can I say that?
You get 30 seconds. You get 30
seconds.
You get a rebuttal. You get 30 seconds.
Okay. My rebuttal on that would be the fact that while I appreciate that we agree that we are a clean energy leader in the world, the business that Dan has mentioned is a perfect example of where the problem would come in sending him to Washington. He says that he wants to somehow stop special interest, but yet his business is built on the backs of taxpayers in North Carolina and ratepayers to Duke Energy. The reality is it's hire lobbyists, get money from the government, and then donate to liberals to make sure that happens. We've got to know where it's coming from.
All right, let's move on to the next question.
I hope you'll give me a chance to respond to that.
You can do it in your next question. Again, I have no problem opening this up into a free-form debate if you both agree to that moving forward. We can discuss that if you'd like to. But this next question, you have both said essentially country before party. We've heard the phrasing from both of you, and you plan to shake up Washington. Mr. McCready, please tell us some specific policies where you have differed from your party, not including your vote for House Speaker.
I'll get to that in a moment. First, I'm going to address this ridiculous attack by Mark Harris on my business. Let me tell you exactly what I did working to build up a new industry here in North Carolina, because it's exactly what I hope to do in Washington, have the honor of serving. Work with Republicans and Democrats to create jobs and create opportunity and make North Carolina a leader. And if I have the honor of serving in Washington, I will work to take our 30,000 clean energy jobs and take that to 100,000 clean energy jobs. By attacking our clean energy industry, Mark Harris is saying we want to give up those 30,000 clean energy jobs. It's another example of how he would take us backwards. On to your question about the Democrats. There are a number of ways where I differ from folks in Washington. As a Marine who served our country in the years after 9/11, I understand being tough on China. I understand bringing accountability to our government. But I'm also a business owner. I believe in a balanced budget. I made payroll and I balanced budget in my business, and they should have to do the same thing in Washington.
Mr. Harris, your minute starts now.
Yeah, I would say that where I probably differ with my party and want to shake up Washington, in some ways goes back to the primary that we came through. And that was the fact that I called out our own party for not only passing the tax cuts, which I agreed with, but I called out our party for taking the step and spending that $1.3 trillion spending bill. As I said earlier, $800 billion of that was to refurbish our military that was hurting, our military that had become, with their equipment, dilapidated over the 8 years of the Obama administration. So we wanted to take care of that. It was the other $500 billion of spending that Republicans, in my mind, stepped into because they had to. It was the only thing that the Democrats would agree to in order to move that bill forward. The president himself, the day he signed it, tapped that 2,032-page bill and said, "We'll talk about this ridiculous thing in a moment." I stand with him in wanting to say that should have never been passed in its entirety, that spending bill.
Mr. McCready, you can have another 30 seconds on this if you'd like.
Well, let me just focus on something Mark Harris just said a moment ago. He's talking about spending bills. Because this is a difference between us. I do not believe that politicians go up to Washington and shut down the government. if they don't get what they want. Mark Harris told you in our debate last week he supports shutting down the government if he doesn't get his way. I think that's wrong. I think that's another way he would take us backwards.
All right, thank you very much. This question goes to Mr. Harris. Correct me if I'm misspeaking, but you are an unabashed conservative, and Democrats would probably paint you as an extreme Republican, particularly on social issues. Unaffiliated voters in the state and this district are growing at a rapid pace. In fact, they outnumber Republicans in our state. Why should they believe you will represent all voters and not just conservative voters in Washington?
Well, I believe that I've shown a record over 30 years as a leader in the community of working with people from all backgrounds, all perspectives, all races, all socioeconomic positions. In fact, that's what you do as a pastor in leading a church. You deal with individuals that come from all different perspectives and socioeconomic, educational levels, and you work together for a cause that is bigger than yourselves. I've shown that record over 30 years, and I really believe that we will be able to work together through building relationships to accomplish just that. And I also believe that it's important that I've not been a part of the swamp. I can help fix the swamp. And I think that's what North Carolinians in the 9th Congressional District are looking for.
Mr. Rtdna, your response?
There could not be more of a difference in how my opponent and I would serve the people of this district. Mark Harris is pledged to join the Extreme Freedom Caucus. This is the most extreme caucus in the entire Congress, a caucus that will shut down the government if they don't get his way. Mark Harris has said if he doesn't get his way on health care, he will shut down the government. If health care is not defunded, he will shut down the government. Mark Harris is not someone who puts country over party. He puts his own extreme ideology over everything else. I'm someone who believes in country over party. Let me tell you, in my platoon, Tim, we had 65 Marines. We came from all over this country. We never cared about if you're Republican or Democrat. My campaign is fueled by Democrats, independents, and Republicans who all believe we need people to put country over party, and we need leadership on behalf of all of us to work together and get things done.
Can I say something?
Yep, you'll get 30 seconds.
I want to rebut something
seconds.
because this is, again, I'm sick and tired of my positions and my record being misrepresented. And I've listened to it over and over tonight. I've listened to it in ads funded by Nancy Pelosi while he denies her of over $600,000 she spent, and other ads that have been run. I'm tired of being misrepresented. I've made it clear, very clear, that last week in the debate that I would not shut down the government just to have my way. But I made it clear in the debate that there may be times and there may be issues upon which we have to stand. And you can slam all you want to on the Freedom Caucus, and you can call them extreme, but if what you call extreme are men and women who are part of that Freedom Caucus, who are fiscally responsible and understand where our nation is, I'll gladly join that.
All right. Your applause lines are taking more time than the questions answered. We appreciate your enthusiasm, but try to hold it back a little bit. Let's move on to immigration. Naomi Brezzi is the next question from Charlotte.
Hi, this question is for Mr. Harris. I live in District 9, so I'm an incumbent, and I'm a single mother who is raising a teenage daughter and caring for 2 aging parents. Can you tell me why I should support your candidacy after you have made comments against women working, and you have been on record saying that you're going to cut services to our seniors? Thank you.
Obviously, Mr. Harris, we'll start with you on this one. Your minute starts now.
Well, I appreciate her raising that question because the reality is that this is another part of the overall strategy that has been exercised by the Democratic Party and by those that are supporting my opponent. The reality is that they took a sermon I preached in Mother's Day of 2013 and pulled things out of context, which in that sermon, let me just be clear what I said, that we are fortunate to live in a time where women can be anything they want to be. They can be the CEO of a company, they can be chairman of the board, they belong in the operating room, the classroom, or wherever they belong. But it is important to also understand it was Mother's Day of 2013, and when God blesses that woman with a child, her motherly instincts kick in. That doesn't mean that her career ends, nor did I suggest that, but it simply made it clear that her motherly instincts kick in, and everything she does from that point forward, from the operating room to the boardroom, is in the best interest of the child. And so I'm thankful to have the opportunity to clear that up. And if anybody wants to attack my faith for actually preaching what was in the Bible, then I'm certainly willing to stand and answer that as well.
Mr. McCready, your minute starts to roost now.
Well, let's look at Mark Harris's own words. And this is not an attack on your faith, Mark. I'm a Christian too. But I believe that men and women are each created in God's image. Men and women are equally valuable and equally capable. And it's past time that women had a seat at the table. Mark has said he called women, quote, servant lovers. He questioned whether women should have careers, suggesting that women should be home cooking, sewing buttons, and learning to, quote, my opponent's words, respond to their husbands, end quote. I think those words speak for themselves.
If he's done, you get 30 seconds.
Once again, let me set the record straight for all the misleading statements. He's now jumped to a second sermon that the left-wing media wrote, and that was the Ephesians passage on Ephesians chapter 5. It says, wives, submit yourselves unto your husbands as unto the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. It follows up with, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. In that message, I made it perfectly clear that every wedding I have done for 30 years, you can check the tapes, that I say if the couple wants that passage used, I speak the first part, but I also stop and say to the husband, but here's how that really works.
All right, Mr. Harris, we got to wrap you up.
All right.
Mr. Harris, Mr. McCready, thank you so much. Thank you for a spirited debate tonight. It is time for closing statements. Each candidate will get 1 minute and begin based on that coin flip. Mr. McCready, your minute starts now.
I don't think there's anywhere in the country with more of a difference on the ballot between my opponent and myself. I want to point out a few things tonight which came up and a couple which didn't. I believe that any kid, no matter their zip code, ought to have the chance to go to a great public school. Mark Harris has said he would abolish the Department of Education. I believe that we need Democrats and Republicans working together to solve hard problems for people here in North Carolina. Mark Harris just said tonight, and he said last week, he would shut down the government if he doesn't get his way. I believe every North Carolina family deserves access to affordable and quality health care. Mark Harris supported a bill that would rip away coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. I believe our seniors have paid into Social Security and Medicare over decades. That is their right. Mark Harris has said, and this is a fact, you can look at his own words, that he would cut Social Security and Medicare for our seniors, especially those under 50. The difference in this race couldn't be greater, and it's between somebody who believes we need to put country over party. We need Democrats and Republicans working together to fix the mess we've got in Washington. It's between somebody who would take us backwards, who practices the same kind of divisive partisan politics that are killing our country.
All right. Mr. Harris, your minute begins.
I want to first of all say thank you to you, Tim, for offering us this opportunity. For everyone here in the theater tonight, I thank you. And for those of you that are watching at home, when this debate began, I told you what to expect. Two different visions. I'm a conservative. I believe in smaller government, lower taxes, and fiscal responsibility. I'll continue the economic progress we've made under President Trump, and you'll always know where I stand. While my opponent, through his words tonight and through his commercials that continue to smear me, likes to think of me as an extremist, if it's extreme to say that I believe the Bible and while I pastored for 30 years, I preach the Word of God, then I'll own that title. If it means to be an extremist, to become a part of something called the Freedom Caucus because they understand the fiscal responsibility in this country, I'll take that title of extremist. My Democrat opponent did not answer the hard questions tonight. He dodged on supporting Nancy Pelosi, and we didn't even get to the fact that he said that last week he left the door open to impeach President Trump. He won't tell you the truth about the liberal agenda. He won't tell you the truth about his liberal agenda because he knows if he does, you won't vote for him. You deserve a congressman who isn't afraid to take a stand. I ask you to stand with me.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you to the audience as well. Remember that early voting is underway now. It continues to November 3rd, and election night is November 6th. Everyone, have a great evening. Thank you so much for watching.